December 13th, 2003. A farm outside Tikrit, Iraq. For 9 months, the United States military had been searching for one man. They had searched palaces. They had searched safe houses. They had interrogated prisoners. They had followed informants, raided compounds, tracked family members, and hunted through an entire country. And after all of that, the trail had led them here, to a quiet farm in the Iraqi countryside. At first, there was nothing unusual about the place, just dirt, small buildings, animal pens, fields, 2 farm compounds sitting in the darkness. Then, between them, soldiers noticed something that didn't belong, a crude covering, dirt and straw arranged over a small patch of ground. They moved closer. They pulled the material away, and underneath it was a sheet of styrofoam. The soldiers lifted it. Beneath it was a narrow hole, a hole so small that it looked almost impossible for a grown man to hide inside. Then something moved. 2 hands slowly emerged from the darkness. The soldiers surrounded the opening, and a tired, bearded man came out. When they asked who he was, he gave them an answer that would become one of the most famous moments of the Iraq War. "I am Saddam Hussein. I am the president of Iraq, and I am willing to negotiate." The most wanted man in Iraq had finally been found. Not inside a palace, not surrounded by bodyguards, not commanding an army. He was hiding beneath the ground. And to understand how he ended up there, you have to go back 9 months. In early 2003, Saddam Hussein still ruled Iraq. For decades, his government had built a powerful security system around him. Information was controlled. Loyalty was rewarded. Disloyalty could be dangerous. Saddam's regime depended on an enormous network of politicians, military officers, intelligence officials, family members, tribal connections, and trusted bodyguards. To the outside world, Saddam appeared to be surrounded by power. But when the invasion began, that entire system started collapsing. On March 20th, 2003, the United States and coalition forces launched the invasion of Iraq. American forces moved rapidly across the country, and within weeks, Baghdad fell. On April 9th, Saddam's statue came down in central Baghdad. The images became one of the defining symbols of the invasion. The regime appeared to have collapsed. But there was one problem. Nobody knew where Saddam was. He had disappeared. American forces searched his palaces. They searched government buildings. They searched compounds connected to his family and his inner circle. But Saddam wasn't there. The man who had ruled Iraq for decades had suddenly become a fugitive. And now the most important question was simple. Where was he? The American military created a system to help answer that question. A deck of playing cards. Each card represented one of the most wanted members of Saddam's former regime. Generals, ministers, intelligence officials, senior Ba'ath Party figures. People who had once stood close to Saddam. And Saddam himself, he was the ace of spades, the highest value target in the deck. At first, the strategy seemed to work. The cards began disappearing one by one. On April 24th, Deputy Prime Minister Tariq Aziz surrendered. Then came other senior figures. Barzan Ibrahim al-Tikriti, one of Saddam's closest relatives and former intelligence chief, was captured. On June 16th, Abid Hamid Mahmoud, Saddam's personal secretary, and one of the men who controlled access to him, was captured near Tikrit. Every capture seemed to bring the Americans closer. But Saddam remained missing. Then came July 22nd. In Mosul, American forces located Saddam's sons, Uday and Qusay. A firefight followed. Both men were killed. For the American military, it was one of the biggest breakthroughs of the hunt. Some of the most important people in Saddam's inner circle were gone. The deck was getting smaller, but the ace of spades was still missing. And that was the problem. The people being captured were mostly the people who had mattered when Saddam was still in power. But Saddam wasn't in power anymore. He was hiding. And hiding required a completely different kind of network. This is where Eric Maddox entered the story. Maddox was a US Army interrogator working in Iraq. And while many investigators were concentrating on Saddam's senior officials, Maddox began looking at the problem differently. He started asking a basic question. If Saddam was no longer running a government, why would he need government officials? He didn't need ministers. He didn't need generals. He didn't need a functioning military command structure. He needed people he trusted, people who could move him, people who could bring him food, people who could provide safe houses, people who knew his family, people who knew where he could disappear without attracting attention. And those people might never appear on a list of senior officials. So Maddox started looking downward through the network, not at the most powerful people, but at the people connected to them. Over several months, he conducted hundreds of interrogations, more than 300, according to accounts of his work. Each interrogation produced fragments: a name, a relative, a village, a driver, a bodyguard, a family connection. One piece of information by itself meant almost nothing, but Maddox began connecting those pieces. He was building a map, not a map of Iraq's government, but a map of Saddam's relationships. And eventually, one family kept appearing, the al-Muslit family. They had long-standing connections to Saddam. And one name became particularly important: Mohammed Ibrahim al-Muslit. He wasn't a famous general. He wasn't a government minister. He wasn't one of the most recognizable names in the deck of cards. But he was connected to Saddam through trust. And that made him potentially more valuable than another high-ranking official. Because if Saddam was hiding somewhere, someone had to know where. The question was whether they could find that person. In early December 2003, the investigation moved towards Samarra, along the Tigris River. American forces raided a house connected to the network. But Mohammed Ibrahim al-Muslit wasn't there. His son was. And during the investigation, one small detail emerged. His father had a connection to a farm near the river. He used to go fishing there. It sounded almost insignificant, but after months of following tiny connections, insignificant details were exactly what Maddox was looking for. The Americans followed the lead. They moved toward the fish farm. They surrounded the area. But again, Mohammed Ibrahim wasn't there. Instead, they captured several men connected to the network. The trail moved again, this time toward Baghdad. Another safe house, another raid, more detainees. And this time, Maddox was running out of time. He was due to leave Iraq soon. The investigation had reached a critical point. The people they had captured were being brought in. One by one, their identities were checked. The first man wasn't Mohammed Ibrahim, the second wasn't him, then came the third. The hood came off, and there he was, Mohammed Ibrahim al-Muslit. After months of chasing his network, the man they had been looking for was finally sitting in front of them. Now, the investigation entered its most important stage, because finding Mohammed Ibrahim was not the same thing as finding Saddam. Maddox needed one final piece. Where was Saddam hiding? After hours of questioning, the information finally came. A farm compound near Adar, south of Tikrit. The location was immediately passed up the chain of command, and within hours, the military began preparing an operation. The operation was given a name: Red Dawn. The objective was not a general search anymore. They had a location. 2 farm compounds were identified as possible targets. They were designated Wolverine 1 and Wolverine 2. On the evening of December 13th, around 600 soldiers from the 4th Infantry Division and a Special Operations Task Force moved toward the area. Vehicles moved through the darkness. Soldiers took positions around the compounds. And then the search began. Buildings were checked, rooms were cleared, outbuildings were searched, animal pens were inspected. Everywhere the soldiers looked, nothing. No Saddam. No obvious sign that the most wanted man in Iraq was anywhere nearby. After 9 months, the operation appeared dangerously close to becoming another dead end. But the soldiers kept searching, and eventually they began checking the spaces between the two compounds. The ground, the dirt, the things that looked insignificant. Then someone noticed the covering. Dirt, straw, something artificial underneath. They pulled it away. Styrofoam. The soldiers lifted the panel, and beneath it was a narrow underground hiding place. It was barely large enough for a man to lie inside. And there, in the darkness, was Saddam Hussein. The search was over. There was no dramatic firefight, no escape attempt, no final battle. The man who had once controlled an entire country was captured without a shot being fired. And when the soldiers brought him out of the hole, they found cash hidden with him, nearly $1 million. 9 months of searching had ended in one of the most unlikely places imaginable, a hole in the ground. Saddam had gone from living inside enormous palaces to hiding beneath a farm, from commanding armies to waiting silently underground, from being the most powerful man in Iraq to being completely dependent on a tiny network of people who could keep him hidden. And that's what makes the story of his capture so interesting. Because the breakthrough didn't come from finding the biggest building, it didn't come from following the highest ranking official, and it wasn't simply a matter of overwhelming military force. The breakthrough came from understanding how a fugitive thinks. The Americans had spent months looking at the old structure of Saddam's power. Generals, ministers, intelligence chiefs, politicians. But Saddam wasn't operating inside that structure anymore. He was operating through trust, family, loyalty, personal relationships. And once Maddox began mapping those relationships, the investigation changed. The search stopped being about finding Saddam directly. It became about finding the people Saddam couldn't live without. One person led to another. One family led to another. One tiny detail led to another. Until eventually, the chain reached the man who knew where Saddam was. And that man led them to the farm. The ace of spades had finally been found. Saddam was handed over to Iraqi authorities in 2004. In December 2006, he was executed, but his capture did not end the Iraq War. The insurgency continued. The consequences of the invasion continued, and Iraq would experience years of violence and political instability afterward. The capture ended one chapter, but it did not end the story. What ended that night was something much more specific, a 9-month hunt for one man. A hunt that began with an entire military searching for a dictator and ended with soldiers lifting a sheet of styrofoam from the ground. Underneath it was a hole. Inside that hole was Saddam Hussein, the ace of spades, the most wanted man in Iraq. And perhaps the strangest part of the entire story is this. For 9 months, the world was looking for Saddam Hussein. But the final clue wasn't hidden inside a palace. It wasn't inside a government archive. It wasn't on a satellite image. It was buried beneath the dirt, waiting for someone to notice.